All right, we're ready to roll. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies for this late-minute start here this evening for tonight's Wednesday, May 11th, Ways and Means Committee meeting. So if I could ask you all to stand and please remain standing after the Pledge of Allegiance for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to take a moment of silence now for Jean Penny, mother of Sue Semino, clerk of the council, who passed on Mother's Day, and all those who served and have served in our military home and abroad. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay. Clerk Casey, if you could please go through the roll call.
Okay. Member Reynolds.
Here.
Member Flaherty.
Here.
And Member Maglio.
Here.
All present.
All right, terrific. We have no approval of minutes this evening. Some old business that we do have on the table is the request for fiscal year 2023 capital plan, which is 22006 as well as 22007. That was tabled on May 4th. Therefore, we will have to have a motion. Do we have a motion?
No.
Motion to... I'm sorry.
Motion to take orders 22006 and... No, sorry. Do we have to say the order number?
Pardon me?
Do we have to say the order number for the capital plan?
You will... let me see here. What we're going to be doing is you're going to be taking orders number 2206 and 2207 off the table.
Motion to take off the table.
Motion to take orders 22006 and 22007 off the table.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so as we did, just a recap on the 4th, we had before us topic of conversation primarily was, or specifically had to do with the remaining sub-motion of 006, which is 007, the capital plan budget for our general fund. There were a number of questions that were asked of the department heads as well as of the mayor's office, and we did receive those answers as well as a bunch of data. I know in one packet we had a 97-page worth of data. I did read it all, and that had primarily, it had some mostly it had to do with fire, headquarters renovation project. So I still have a few questions in that area, but so what I'd like to do first is give my committee members, fellow committee members, the opportunity for their initial questions. And first up, I'd like to ask Councilor Flaherty if you would move on your questions.
I appreciate the information that was supplied, very detailed, and answered all of my questions concerning the capital budget in as much detail as I could hope for. So I have no additional questions at this time.
Thank you very much. And Councilor Maglio, questions?
No questions.
Okay. All right. I do have a few questions. So thank you for all that information on the fire station. There was a lot of information there to go through, particularly to the amendments and what that data, what those amendments contained. What I was able to gain from all of that information, that primarily a lot of this money and these quotes that we're seeing have to do with design and analysis. I didn't see a whole lot about actual construction in that documentation. So I just wanted to ask a few other questions. I know one area in particular was, again, there was a lot of documentation there that came from Lorraine C's office. A lot of it had to do what you call boilerplate information concerning indemnity, insurance, all these various things that come along that are required in contracts and through procurement. So thank you for all of that information, and pretty straightforward, no questions on those. But I did have some questions concerning, most of it had to do, and if someone can correct me on it, but most of it had to do with design development.
That's correct, Chairman Reynolds, because as we have indicated previously, we are currently in the design phase of the project. And that is why we have the two firms retained, Vertex and Context, and the contracts and corresponding amendments, as you indicated, were provided as requested. We have not moved yet into the construction phase, in large part because we don't have funding approved to carry us through that portion of the project. So the architect and the OPM, in conjunction with the internal team, and joining us on this topic here this evening is Chief Jim O'Brien, Building Inspector Russ Forsberg, and Facilities Director Mike McGurty, all of whom have been working with the OPM and architect to finalize the design plans for the project, which will then go out to bid for a general contractor, and that at that point we will be able to formalize with more specificity the contract costs and the components of the construction associated with that phase of the project.
Very good. That does make sense, and I don't have any questions concerning that explanation. So, but what I do have a question on, please bear with me a moment here as I pull up that document. I didn't want to print it out.
No, fair.
So,
I did not print it out either, so I don't have the individual contracts in front of me.
Right, so we'll save a tree on that one. All right, let's see. Friday now. There we go. Okay. So as I said, most of it, and I don't know if these questions may be answered by the folks who are working and coordinating through the design construction phase. So I do know that the price that you have stated, that question was straightforward, $11.5 million. So is that a rough order of magnitude at this time, or do you foresee that number going up?
That is the budget that we have given the OPM and the architect, and that is the budget they are designing to. So part of, as we've talked about previously, we have taken kind of the initial design work and proposals, and we are value engineering that to ensure that we're still meeting the needs of the fire department while staying within the $11.5 million, which is the number that we are confident we can support financially in the borrowing.
Okay, great. So again, I just want to reiterate, I think all of us are in agreement that that is a long overdue renovation for that project, that building. We do need to bring it into the 21st century. There is what is being requested and what has been depicted in the design and in the explanation, I should say the summaries of objectives so far, I certainly agree with wholeheartedly. That will bring up the safety level as well as just a better, extremely better work environment. Mike, I just want to make sure, again, we did have a discussion the other evening on a couple of points about costs that had they been baked in already? Have they already been factored in? I know one of them had to do around the elevator. And some of the numbers I saw, the only numbers I saw around the elevator and the power source, et cetera, are just really they're just design costs right now, just analysis.
So the costs associated with the elevator, the installation of the elevator, and any necessary work in the area where the elevator is currently designed to be located are all included in the budgeted for costs.
For the $11.5 million?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I did not see an answer regarding the soil testing.
So answers to the additional substantive questions, and my apologies, they were provided earlier today from the OPM. And as it relates to the soil testing, and I think it was given the past use of the east garage, there was concern about contamination. And in speaking to the OPM, and based on the information that they have reviewed and received, they do not anticipate requiring any confirmatory soil samples on the site, and as a result, no funds have been budgeted for the same.
So they do not anticipate it, and has there been any preliminary testing done to validate that?
Based on the information that they have and the plans and the studies that they've reviewed, they don't believe it is necessary. There's no recommendation to do that.
So from the plans and the studies, but have they actually done a physical test that would provide some kind of level of certainty, level of confidence that there would be no soil testing? I mean, the reason I ask, it being over a 90-year-old site, and environmental laws as they have changed through the years, things that were considered to be standard practices in the days that we've now found over the last 30, 40 years are not environmentally safe practices. So, again, I just want to get a level of assurance that this isn't an area that we may find ourselves coming back and asking for more money on.
I've been joined at the table by Building Inspector Russ Forsberg, and with your permission, would ask him to
Absolutely.
expand on that response.
Welcome, Mr. Forsberg.
Welcome. Thank you. With respect to the east garage, there are no floor drains specifically in there, which would give an opportunity for possible soil contamination. The slab is unchanged from its initial construction. There are no imperfections to speak of that would allow for the seepage of oils, gases, or other mechanical fluids under the slab and into the soils. I think it's based upon their visual observations in touring the facility on a number of occasions that lead them to believe that it's extremely unlikely that there'd be any soil contamination that they will experience after the demolition of that garage and in the excavation for the subsequent foundations.
Okay, and I do understand you have the original plans from when that facility was built, the building itself. And was that east garage a part of the original facility?
I have not seen the original plans for its construction, so I don't know if that was an addendum to the building or if that was part of the original construction.
Okay, the reason I ask again, is there? I'm not looking to try to poke holes in this. Absolutely, I'm just trying to get a level of expectation. I think from a due diligence standpoint, which all of you, that's your profession, and I have no doubt that what you do is you do it top notch, and all the folks who are involved here. But it just, I don't know, I'm still having a difficult time getting my head around the fact that of almost, over 90 years of use of that site of heavy equipment, back in the day, I know back in the early 30s, late 20s, it was not uncommon for fuel to be dumped right into the ground. So that is my point. That's my point. I don't know if there's a history around that, and if you were to find yourself digging up and excavating that ground and you ran into some kind of an issue, is it completely out of the question in your perspective, I guess, from the data and the information that you are working with presently, that potentially wouldn't be out of the question that maybe something may be there?
Right. Well, you have to remember the particular garage we're talking about here was largely smaller vehicles. It was not that of the engines or ladder trucks and such. So the likelihood was that, in fact, those vehicles were serviced off-site as opposed to being on-site by a diesel mechanic or similar tradesperson that might have repaired the engines in the actual apparatus base. So again, I think the likelihood of that is remote at best, which is why they did not want to put a contingency in there for soil sampling. Clearly, during the course of demolition and excavation, if any telltale signs are arrived at, that would be a different story. But the expectation is that there will not be. And you have to remember also that in addition to the garage floor, which is intact, you had a hard surface immediately outside of that, one which pitched, off-site to the street itself. So the likelihood of any contamination resulting from any perhaps oil changes or the like in that area will again be really remote.
But if there was, I know that there is certain chemicals that are used as far as the fire suppression that these vehicles provide.
Right, but again, you're talking about
But cleaning perhaps, or
right.
just, I mean, a lot of that work is done in maintenance, user maintenance, et cetera, has been done in the yards of these facilities.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So, I mean, again, smaller vehicles, unlikely that these type of vehicles are coming back with contaminants, much unlike the larger apparatus, the pumper trucks, the ladder trucks and the like. So again, I think, it would be much the same as any residential garage, for instance, in terms of the likelihood of contamination below the slab itself. I would say that there would be greater cause for concern if, in fact, the slab was not intact, if there were discernible, cracks that, could allow for the passage of, again, oils, gases, and other fluids.
Okay, and so, I don't know what the use of that site was before it was a fire department. Yes, Chief O'Brien.
Just make sure you're speaking to the mic, Chief.
Can you hear me now? That garage was an addition in the late 1950s. If you look at the original plans, which I do have, that was not a part of the original blueprint. I did speak to one of our retired firefighters who actually got on in the early 60s and confirmed that it was built in the 50s. What that was used for primarily is vehicle storage. From time to time it had different purposes. BEMA occupied that garage for roughly 8 years, I think, and just used it as an office/storage. There was no hazardous materials that were there. I was actually working there when BEMA was in there. Before that, it started as vehicle storage, went to BEMA, went back to vehicle storage. So occasionally, and I mean occasionally, there would be an oil change on a smaller car done in there. That's the extent of any hazardous materials.
Okay, well, and I do appreciate that, providing that information. But from a regular site preparation and review process, what would be a cost of just even doing any kind of some type of preliminary marker or testing for that area? I mean, are we talking that this be something that would be prohibitive to the budget as it stands today for the overall project, or is it something that, from a risk mitigation standpoint, might be a minor cost?
Well, you have to remember, though, the likelihood, if there were to be contamination below the garage, would be, central to that space there, which really could not be evaluated until the demolition occurs.
Okay.
And then in the course of demolition, field observations will be made as to the soil conditions, not only for possible contamination, but also for suitability for the repurposing of that land for the addition. We're going to be looking for, in terms of organic materials or other such unsuitable fill that might have to be excavated and removed and replaced with more suitable fill if that were the case. So doing a preliminary soil evaluation probably wouldn't be prudent at this particular time, only because you're not getting to the area that would be most likely the area of contamination.
Okay, and that is a clear explanation, certainly. I'm still just having a hard time getting this around my head that there's been no money allocated for the potential, as a contingency.
There's been no money allocated because in the expert opinion of the OPM and the architect, such testing is not required.
At this point?
They have indicated, based on what they know and the visual observations made of the site, that at no point will any such testing be required. Now, you certainly can't plan for everything,
right.
But again, they understand the budget that we're working in, and that's the budget they're designing for, and included in that will be an allowance for contingencies. So in the event of unforeseen costs and expenses, there will certainly be funding set aside. But what we're talking about now, in the phase that we're in and the consultants that we've retained, they're telling us that that is not an anticipated expenditure and not one that they are currently accounting for.
Fair enough. So we've had this conversation. I just wanted to have it on the record that, as we move forward, really now is the best time for us to identify any costs and to fund those costs as we see necessary moving forward.
If I could add something, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
For what it's worth, there was a feasibility study done by Habib and Associates in 2014. there was no soil testing done on the garage site because they felt at the time there was no need for it. And that was 8 years ago. So
Okay.
for what that's worth.
That was, and I would take it they probably used the same level of approach that the current consultants or contractors are using to provide you with their assessment on this current assessment. Okay, great. So, very good. I'm gonna let that item. So you've answered my questions on that item. We've talked a little bit about the what ifs. So as we move down the road, my hope is that we're not going to run into anything. Absolutely, certainly not. Okay, but I've been taught to never say never. So my last question would be then is that I did get an answer on what type of fire suppression, that you are going to have a wet fire suppression, and if I recall from my notes, this new fire suppression system, is this new to the fire headquarters building itself? This
Yes.
wet fire, okay. Okay, and can you explain to me just a little bit about the considerations that go into configuration, perhaps even that go into implementing such a system?
Well, what limited knowledge I have about building, and Russ may be able to expand on this, but if you drive by an office building, hotel, things like that, you'll see a sprinkler tie-in on the outside of the building. It may be a wet system, it may be a dry system, but it gives us the ability to tie into that and pump from a hydrant. With a building of this size, you would normally use a wet system, and the water that's contained in that wet system is usually more than enough to suppress any fire or potential spread of a fire.
Okay, so we're not looking at any other additional components adding to that infrastructure that's dedicated specifically to providing the wet suppression than what's existing today?
If I could. So what we're talking about here is what they're commonly referred to as a mixed system. There are spaces within the building itself that are not considered conditioned, which means they're not heated, such as the attic and the apparatus bay. So those portions of the sprinkler system will be what they refer to as a dry system, which if a sprinkler head within a dry system is activated through the thermostatic connection there, water will immediately flow to that. It's just not being held in the pipes because we don't want to have a situation where the sprinkler lines will rupture because of a drop in temperature or such. So that's what we have there. They typically will put in that something equivalent to like an antifreeze, if you will. Okay, so that will be the lead material coming out of a given sprinkler head prior to water being discharged from that location. As far as sprinkler design and coverage, basically any given sprinkler head that we're going to be employing in the system will cover roughly 160 square feet. So you'll probably see in the ultimate design, the layout of this space, probably in the office of one sprinkler head per office. You might see them randomly spaced in hallways or in dormitory rooms or the like, because again, with the presence of walls, you have to account for a head on either side of that. When you design a system such as this here, you're designing it for only 1 in 10 heads to go off in terms of the actual water supply to the actual system. Because the hope is that you're going to knock it down and contain, as the chief said, you're going to contain it. Not necessarily extinguish it, but contain it until such time as further resources can be brought to bear on it and it will be extinguished.
Okay, so are you saying then that there isn't any need to add to the water delivery to that building or anything else that's from a water service standpoint right now, that you'd be able to deliver that with this new configuration being put in place and the technology you just described?
Correct, because what you have there is you have a 6-inch water main which will be replaced and is carried under the contract in terms of replacement of that water line. The domestic use is fairly minimal in terms of its need and supply and what have you. We have every expectation that there's good static pressure there, so we're not going to be looking to augment that with a pump of any sort.
Okay.
And again, with the sprinkler system, you're not designing that for all the heads to go off simultaneously. It's a very small fraction of that. So yes, I believe the designers, I believe that what you have for a service there now will be adequate to support both domestic and supply suppression.
All right. Well, thank you. Again, I appreciate your patience. I appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions. And I don't have anything further as it pertains to the fire station headquarters renovations. So I will ask if there's anything further from the other committee members on that particular topic of the fire headquarters station. Nothing? Okay. We have Councilor Flaherty, comment.
With regard to the fire stations, I am satisfied that there is a sound plan in place to move this project forward. I am satisfied that it has appropriate oversight as the project progresses, and I am certainly satisfied that there is tremendous need for this project. So I am entirely happy to put my support behind it. I have some concerns that there's not enough money in reserve for unforeseen circumstances considering how old the building is, and if we are unlucky and that happens, the town will ask for supplementary money and that will also get my support. So we have chosen to go down this road in this way, and I think it's a good move, and so I just wanted to make that entirely clear. You've endured a lot of questions, and it has been helpful to know all of that information because residents ask all the time. So the more I know, the more I can tell them. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a couple of housekeeping things I had noticed, and you might want to call this nitty-gritty, but I noticed in some of the documentation that were provided from Vertex mentioned OPM for the town of Situate on your documentation. So I'm assuming it was just a copy and paste that the Vertex may have been using this submittal as, again, as I say, kind of the boilerplate type of requirements, that is amendments that go into those contracts. And I think there is some dates as well, and I just want clarification where they mentioned is, hold on, let's see here. 3/31/22, but I think that may have just been the design. So as far as, I know you've given us the cost, overall cost, and what was the overall end date for the project?
So it's a little bit dependent. We're on hold right now and making sure that we have the appropriate funding to see us through the next phase. Once hopefully the request gets approved, the design phase will continue. We'll round out the value engineering component that we've been working on, and the next step would be to put it out to bid. Once construction starts, we're looking at about a 15-month timeline.
And that bid process you're anticipating to be completed?
I would suggest that could take anywhere from 45 to 60 days.
Still some dependencies on that right now to be able to come up with a date certain. Okay,
correct.
Great. And I'm sorry, I said I had all my questions, but I just did a quick review of my notes. And so, Chief, I think this one's more for you. Could you just take a couple of minutes here to just walk through the concept of the phasing and the transition of your firefighters and the building itself until it's completed?
As far as the Galvin House?
Yes, that would be probably the most, the most high-level component of how that's going to disrupt any of your normal operations.
Right now, facilities, as I mentioned last time, is doing yeoman's work, getting that ready for us. I don't anticipate any delays. I mean, we may have a couple of seconds. I've also spoke to Mike regarding, I call them Quonset huts. I'm not sure the actual term, like Quonset huts that will house the apparatus, especially in the winter.
I know you had stated some concern about equipment needing to be warm.
Yeah, well, they're diesel engines, so they need to be indoors.
Right.
And this would serve that purpose.
Okay.
But literally from the back door of the Galvin House to where the apparatus will be, we may have a 10 to 15 second delay. So
okay, and the percentage of time do you think that your folks will be displaced from their normal quarters until the new quarters are ready?
I would say I would stick with that 15 months.
15 months, so the duration of the project?
Yes.
Essentially. It wouldn't be, you'd be able to move in while other stuff or, like maybe punch lists are done, I'm assuming.
No, I think the whole idea of facilities getting this done as early as they're going to get it done is that we'll be ready to go as soon as the OPM says, hey, you got to get out of here. So,
certificate of occupancy.
You will be in there as soon as we can, and let them have at it.
Thank you, I appreciate all that time. Thank you for those questions on that, Chief. I think we're all set with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to ask the committee also, I know that we still had some outstanding questions from our last meeting. There were the ADA, and I don't know if those questions have been answered. We also had some questions about the parking lot for the $80,000 for the town hall parking lot. So I'm going to ask, and I'll start with you, Member Flaherty, or Councilor Flaherty. Do you have any questions on those two items?
No, I listened to what we heard in the last meeting. I made statements I stand by at that time, and I see no need to repeat them.
Councilor Maglio, any questions?
I could say that I'm more or less in the same boat. I don't think I've seen anything that changes what my concerns were, and that is where I stand right now.
Okay. I would like to ask one more time about the parking lot. So who would like to come up and answer my questions on that?
You could perhaps ask the question and then we can determine.
Okay.
I know that
right,
Director McGurty here is probably the best suited, but it would be question dependent. And then I do have an additional update on the ADA capital as a follow-up to an item we discussed last week.
Okay, great.
So one of the projects I mentioned that was in the queue for ADA funding was a solar-powered on-demand pedestrian crossing device. A concern came to us utilizing the See-Click Fix system that was forwarded to task for review as to whether or not it would be appropriately placed at this intersection of Wayne Ave and where the Royal Lake condominiums are on Pond Street. Through the committee review, the engineering department did an evaluation of the location and has determined that the placement of such a beacon is appropriate at this intersection and would provide a significant enhancement in the area of accessibility at the location. The cost for the project and the beacon is $8,300. In addition to the $8,300, there's also an additional $8,000 that has been requested to construct ADA-compliant curb ramps at the same location. So it's effectively going to be a wholesale enhancement of the intersection on Pond Street at just over $16,000. That funding is going to come from the ADA compliance appropriation from fiscal year 21 through the Municipal Licenses and Inspections Department. So we had kind of talked about that more generally at the last meeting, but that was just approved earlier today. So that is an expenditure that we're going to see in the near future utilizing the funding from fiscal year 21.
All right, the chair recognizes Councilor Maglio.
So that's helpful to know that, because one of the documents we received, I believe it was today, it could have been yesterday though, showed the unspent funds from previous fiscal years. And there were some considerable unspent funds, if I was reading that correctly.
So the spreadsheet that was provided yesterday included, as we had discussed last week, all three ADA-related capital appropriations that have been consistent over the last several years for fiscal years 20 and 21, as well as the expenditures that have come out of those to date. And you are correct, I think due to a variety of reasons, COVID being one of them, the fiscal 21 ADA compliance line had not seen any expenditures to date. Now remember, we are currently spending fiscal year 21 allocations even though we are technically in fiscal year 22. So now that we've identified this project and the DPW lines don't necessarily have the funding to support it, they will look to the Municipal Licenses and Inspections Program to support the cost for this ADA enhancement.
So that, if I can just kind of reflect that back to you to make sure I understand what you just said, that money that was previously appropriated for current spending and previous spending if it's unspent and other departments have a need in that area, they can ask, and that's part of this shared sort of merging of funds that are made available for different departments.
That's correct. So as we've talked about previously, and that Director McGrath, who was also here this evening, expanded on, the funds that are usually maintained in this specific line item are used in collaboration with other departments to support projects as they come up. And so that's how we intend to move forward with the fiscal 22 appropriation, which will be spent in fiscal 23.
So I guess my reaction to that, and the reason why I'm still kind of in the same space I was last week, and perhaps I just need more information and need to sit down with someone to fully understand this, because I was going to ask it as part of some of the operational questions in terms of, because even though these are capital funds, this is about how our departments and services operate, right, to serve residents. So if there's a cost of something, that's the cost. And so splitting it up and separating it out over departments, to me, it makes it a little bit more challenging to track those funds and to figure out what they're being spent on. So me as a new person, all of you have been here for many years, you're all very used to what this looks like in the budget, but for me, someone who's trying to come in and say, what happened to that appropriation? I wouldn't necessarily look at the Parks Department to find out where funds that were allocated to the Health Department ended up.
So the central kind of repository for that, and I'll tell you exactly what I did to respond to the request, I went to accounting, because the accounting department will be able to pull up each line item and produce an expense report for that. And so with that information and some coordination with the departments, which happened after, we were able to, I'm not going to just give you the expense report because it's not going to offer you any details. So what we did was, starting with the expense report, and then working with the departments to provide more detail on what those expenses were. So, for example, you can see under the FY20 DPW capital for sidewalk repairs, it lists the locations where the sidewalk repairs occurred. You have the same thing for the ADA pathways. You have the same thing for the parks that were enhanced. And then under the municipal licenses and inspections, for example, you have repairs that were made along the sidewalls. So the detail of the expenditures all goes to the same place. I don't know, I'll be completely honest, I don't know why the funds were divided in this manner. I was not here when that decision was made. I think I don't particularly care for when people tell me this, but that's kind of the way it's always been done. If I were to guess, I might think that because the Commission on Disabilities falls under the purview of the Department of Municipal Licenses and Inspections, and the building inspector often played a role as far as ADA compliance was involved, it probably made sense to allocate some funding to that department. But when you're talking about the most efficient way to spend, you want to have opportunity for departments to come together and support projects that may not be restricted to one department or another. And so this is a way to allow for financial and departmental support across department lines, for lack of a better term, utilizing the funding for ADA. That's what it is. It's ADA compliance, it's ADA sidewalk repairs, it's ADA pathways. So for me, it's less about the department that it falls under and more about the use it's designated for, because that's what governs how the funding is spent.
Thank you for that. For me, I think I view it a little bit differently, because it's also about the transparency in terms of making sure that money that was designated for something is spent on that, and knowing what the criteria is. So if the Commission on Disabilities had sought funding for something and was told there was no funding for it, but at the same time someone from another department sought funding for something, and there's unspent money in the ADA funds on the health department that can be spent on something for the DPW or recreation or elderly or whatever it may be, that seems to me that it makes it more difficult to understand, A, why that money was designated in the first place, B, why it wouldn't actually go through the Commission on Disabilities if it's ADA related, and C, what that criteria is for a park that needs to be made accessible, what that oversight is, or at something at a certain in the town building, a certain street, a certain corner. I think it makes it more difficult because I can't go to the accounting department and ask for a printout, right? I can only look at a budget that is given to me, and as a resident, I wouldn't even necessarily know how to go through all these links on the website to actually get down to the core of how much money is being spent on a certain item. So I know that we can't fix that as part of this budget process, but it does make me wonder about then what is that criteria for when changes are made or spending happens, what is the priority in terms of whether it should go to the Department of Rec, or it should be spent by the Human Resources Department, or whatever the department may be. How is that actually, what is that process?
So I'm hearing a couple of different questions and comments kind of rolled in there. So First and foremost, how the money is spent is 100% public information. We field hundreds of thousands of public records requests every day and provide information. So there are mechanisms, and it can always be easier, it can always be more straightforward, but there are mechanisms for this information for residents to obtain the information. And if residents wanted more information about how the monies were being spent, or kind of the list of projects, we can certainly provide it. And I think we have tried and have made significant progress in what information we publish about new projects and enhancements being made, not just as it relates to ADA, but across the board from a construction standpoint. So I say I went to accounting only to kind of provide some background for how the information is maintained. So the money is allocated under the purview of individual departments, and as I said, that's kind of the way it's always been. I don't know why, but I don't believe, and in what I have seen, and we have representatives from the departments that have the monies allocated to them, I don't think that has ever served as a hindrance to how the funds are spent. The example I gave about the Beacon on Pond Street is a perfect example. That was a resident that came forward with a concern that was reviewed and determined to be appropriate just in concept, the placement of this device at this intersection. And the task made a recommendation to Director McGrath, who forwarded the recommendation to the mayor, and the mayor approved the utilization of those funds for that. We are also, and we have talked about it at great length, we are in the final stages of the transition plan. The transition plan is going to take all of the potential ADA needs of the town, and they're going to prioritize those for us. And with that information, we will be able to prioritize how the funds are spent. Understanding that there are certain, I would imagine, there are certain projects that are going to be identified that are going to be very costly. And cost is a consideration that we make every day in making decisions. But we will have a roadmap at that point that will be publicly available, that I expect there will be public presentation, an opportunity for feedback on, that will include those priorities. And that will run the gamut as to what type of work it's going to be. I'm not aware, and I'm not aware of a situation where a request for funding in this area has been made and been denied due to lack of funds. And I don't think that what department is technically the keeper of the funds would have any impact on that. We have a number of experts, most of whom are seated behind me, who are responsible for evaluating the needs, townwide needs in the area of accessibility. And we have to rely on the recommendations that they make to us as to what is appropriate. You know, the beacon is another example. It may have been that from an engineering standpoint, that intersection would not be appropriate for the device of this nature. And that's purely from an engineering standpoint, because there are certain obligations and requirements when you're evaluating an intersection. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I guess I don't see the way the funds are allocated as a hindrance to use, because at the end of the day, it's about accessibility and ADA compliance. That is the standard that governs.
So let me throw out a for instance.
Sure.
A request about an emergency vehicle that has the capacity to transport someone in a wheelchair if there's a fire, right? So some sort of add-on to a police car or some sort of add-on to a fire truck. I don't know the mechanical aspects of these, but I know that that was a conversation that had come up a number of times off and on during Commission on Disabilities proceedings. So that was not, and you can correct me, Mary Beth, if I'm remembering this, if I'm forgetting any details or remembering this incorrectly, but that was something that was not granted, or really even, it didn't appear that it even received any real support because of the lack of funding. And so in terms of knowing that there's a fund that is connected to the needs of a commission who could actually use those funds, I think that maybe therein lies an area to create more transparency and a process around how that committee could make official requests for those kinds of capital items that, in fact, if there was someone in a wheelchair that needed to be evacuated, we don't have that capacity.
So, did the fire chief leave? Okay, but Director McGrath, because I'm aware of the situation, which means it was vetted internally, because at least it made it to my attention. And my recollection was that was not about funding. It was an evaluation performed by both the police and fire departments, who made the recommendation that we not expend funds for that item for a variety of factors, including risk and liability, but also that we have the services of Brewster Ambulance that have all of their vehicles, or have vehicles with the capability to do that. And in those circumstances where that type of a transport or assistance would be necessary, we have Brewster engaged and likely to be on scene in order to provide that service. So that was not a question of funding, and perhaps there could have been better public dialogue about that, and I don't recall to what extent it was discussed at a meeting, but it was discussed, and that was not a funding question. It was a determination that it was not appropriate.
When you say it was discussed at a meeting, are you referring to the commission meetings, or are you referring to internal meetings?
No, I'm saying I don't know to what extent it was discussed at a commission meeting, and so perhaps that is an example where if it was not sufficiently explained in that forum, that we can be more mindful about, if a request is made, having a public dialogue around the reasons for why or why not it is deemed to be an appropriate expenditure.
I agree with Ms. Taub that it was, we did receive the information from the Commission on Disabilities at a meeting, and what they were advised of is that we did need to take that to the mayor's office, the chief of staff at the time, as well as the town solicitor, to see what the requirements would be through the town, liabilities, etc., and also coordinate with police and fire on exactly what Ms. Taub had mentioned. And one of the great things that was mentioned in this was the liability factor. It's not normally a policy that the town will take on a person's personal equipment, because there is a liability factor with that. So it was not a funding issue, because clearly the funding, if there was an ability to fund it, that would be a perfectly acceptable use of monies that would be approved for my capital for ADA. So it wasn't a funding issue, it was a liability issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful.
And those are things that were relayed back to the commission once we spoke with them, once we spoke with the town administration as well as legal. Those comments were brought back to the commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All set?
Yeah.
So you rest for the moment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Councilor Maglio. Okay, so ADA, I think we're moving on to the next topic, and this, I believe, is the last topic. But before I do move on we want to just discuss quickly a couple of follow-ups on the parking lot request, the $80,000 parking lot resurfacing request for Town Hall. But before we move on to that, I just want to note that with Sean McGoldrick from CLA being out sick this evening, we have with us representing Sean is Catherine Pomeroy. Is that the right way to pronounce Pomeroy? Okay. I'm not throwing in that extra E. All right. Thank you. Well, welcome, Catherine, joining us this evening. Thanks for standing in for Sean. I know that Catherine is very familiar with the Braintree books and the process that we're moving through, having working close with Sean. So thank you for being here this evening to provide support.
Glad to be here.
Okay, thank you. So, Chief of Staff Todd, so we do have a question concerning the parking lot, and what we'd like to do is start off just very briefly, just a recap again of the scope of work, what that $80,000 will be doing to, what in the parking lot actually is getting addressed for $80,000.
I would ask Director McGurty and perhaps John Thompson to join me at the microphone.
Thank you.
Also, it was brought to my attention as the gentleman joined us at the table that the parking lot was originally slated for repair and repaving roughly 2 years ago, and that funding was diverted elsewhere. And so, just again, a little bit of history. I also learned that there has been, and I think Mr. Hulk is here, there has not been any significant work other than patching to the parking lot since it's as far back as we could all remember, which is probably several decades ago. So just again, further highlighting the previously identified need, which certainly has only worsened over time as we request the funds to address those issues now.
Great. Thank you for that recap. Mr. McGurty, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As the facilities director, I have been receiving complaints for the past 5 years regarding the parking lot, and I think if anyone looks out the window, it speaks for itself. We had a number of seniors fall, trip. It's very difficult to do snow removal, even ice melting it. We're getting big chunks breaking up constantly. We keep trying to fix it, and the problem is it's not going to go away with just a quick fix. It needs to be regraded. I think our town engineer, Mr. Thompson, can better speak on the actual overall project itself. But in general, we have been asking for an upgrade on this parking area for well over 5 years. I have worked here in the building for a lot longer than that, and it has been in basically the same condition. There have been a few seasons that we've been able to put large patches down there that have, maybe held out for a year, 18 months, but we're always back to square one. With this project, we're also going to clean up the islands that are out there now that are deplorable. And this being our town hall, our home of government here in Braintree, it's time that we clean it up, make it look as nice as the inside of the building that we've done. And with that, we would hope to work with the building department and address the handicap ramp that we have out there as well. So that is the reason that we have proposed this once again. And any other questions with design?
Okay, yep, so my question, thank you for the recap, and I don't disagree with anything that you've said as far as the history and the need. Don't disagree whatsoever. So what my concern is, and this is why I've asked my first question was, please tell me what is the scope of work to be done with the $80,000?
Sure.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can answer that question. So, essentially, we're planning on using the same contractors that we use for roadway and sidewalks around the town to excavate the existing asphalt, regrade the subbase as necessary to, eliminate any low spots, to ensure that we get positive drainage, to also look at the drainage system in the parking lot, make any repairs to the drainage system or tie-ins that may be necessary to help correct any drainage issues there, and then finally resurface the parking area with probably 1.5 to 2 inches of new asphalt. And again, really just concentrate, making sure that the drainage works and also making sure we have a nice traversable, smooth surface for parking and for traversing.
Great, and I love the objectives. I just want to be clear. I know when we first asked the question about what the scope of work was, that drainage was not part of it. Excuse me, the drainage system was not part of it. There was a comment that was given to us that, well, we can look at the drainage system, maybe there's something that's not connected, or if there's a blockage, or something of that nature. So that leads me to the question about, so with the allocated $80,000, okay, for this project, if you're allocated $80,000, is it going to cover that additional work that you may find with the drainage issues?
We believe that it will, yes. And Assistant Director Hulk here, I think I mentioned last time we met that we would more than likely lean on the Highway Division to help us. So once we do some drainage investigations, if we determine that the existing drainage structure is just what's known as a dry well as opposed to a catch basin that actually has a pipe that takes the water away, a dry well would simply just be a structure that's attempting to infiltrate surface water into the ground.
Yep.
So if we do in fact determine that that structure is not connected to the municipal system, we would ask the Highway Division, just in the hopes of getting it done more efficiently, to actually lay some drainage pipe for us and get the structure tied in.
So with that, so I'll just direct now to thank you, Assistant Superintendent Hulk. So understanding that description from Mr. Thompson of what would be augmented by the general contractor that would use to do the work would be any necessary work as it pertains to drainage would be augmented by the resources of the Highway Department. Is that correct?
Correct. It definitely could be. We did start, Stormwater Division started the preliminary investigation out there, some updated mapping. Actually have not found anything to be a dry well yet. We do have several lines that we do want to TV inspect, camera.
Yeah.
That contractor, we're just getting them scheduled, so preliminary investigations do look good out there. It has been started, but yes, any minor work, which we're hoping at this time it would be, could be handled in-house to defer some of the costs. And like I said, there's nothing glaring at this moment from our initial investigations.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. So I know I'll just kind of borrow a term you used, that you're hoping that it'd only be minor work if there was anything to be done. Would you be able to quantify best case scenario as far as an expense, and then perhaps a worst case scenario that you might find from an expense standpoint? And the only reason I ask this question again is that I'm being an old project management, scope creep is always a killer, and we need to make sure that we're out ahead of time so that we can get that financing before.
Okay, yep. As little as, $1,500, $1,800 for a quick, small, repair in-house on a one-day job. Currently, again, there does not appear to be any blocked lines. There's nothing holding water, which would lead to a more elaborate repair, which, I mean, sky could be the limit at that point, 5,000, 8,000, depending on how bad the damage, how much would have to be removed, installed, but there's nothing pointing to that at this time.
Okay, thank you. That's very good. I appreciate that answer. I'm going to ask my fellow committee members if they have any questions pertaining to this project at this time. I know we do have one question. Do Councilor Flaherty, you have a question?
Not a question, if Councilor Maglio has a question.
Councilor Maglio, questions?
I do. So, and forgive me, because I don't have that printout in front of me, but I keep pulling out my calculator here. So, we know that that project costs $110,000 to do the parking lot, but we're splitting that amount up over different budgets. We also know that we have some unspent funds that have been previously allocated that they amount to what, 70,000, I think, in unspent money that has been previously allocated over the past 2 fiscal years?
So there is about 72,000 in the Yes, there is a fair amount of unspent ADA funding, so that could support establishing new handicap accessible parking spaces, the striping of those parking spaces, signage for those parking spaces, potentially the access from the spaces in the parking lot to the accessible entryway. So there is existing available funds in previous capital appropriations that could certainly go to support that.
So then why would we ask for more money to support that, to go to that same fund? Here's where I'm having a hard time understanding. Unless that question made sense.
It did not. I'm sorry.
Okay. So we have money in previous budgets that are for a specific purpose. And we have needs. And in some cases, that specific purpose can fund that need. But when it comes to the parking lot and accessibility and ADA, we have ADA funds that were not spent, and we are saying that we need more money to support the ADA components of the parking lot. So that's one thing, that's one route that I don't follow that. The second thing, if I can just add an overlay on that,
sure,
is that we also were told at the last meeting that these funds are available also because there are needs that come up that we may not be able to anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, the new money coming in, if it's appropriated, is already designated for things. So it's not that it would be available for other departments, since it's already slated for certain projects. So all of those things can't be true at the same time.
Okay. So I think where the confusion lies is in the term slated for certain projects. So when the funds are appropriated, when the $100,000 for ADA compliance under municipal licenses and inspections, or any department for that matter,
for previous fiscal years,
for any of the fiscal years, when the funds are appropriated, they are appropriated in a lump sum, $100,000 in that case, for use under the general category of ADA compliance. So as we sit here, we have ideas based on discussions between the departments for how that funding is going to be divvied up amongst the projects. We have the Sunset Lake Bathhouse pathways, we have the handicap ramp, we have supporting playground equipment. But if any of those projects comes in under budget in a perfect world, and that funding isn't used for that, it remains available for use under the general heading of ADA compliance. So in the case of the parking lot, we do not have funds allocated as we sit here for the general excavation and repaving, because that in and of itself is not an ADA project. So that's the $80,000 that would be appropriated under the building improvements line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Specific use, we have $80,000 to use for the parking lot, and anything that comes with it. Let's say the parking lot comes in at under, what we would do is have, we've seen it in the past, appropriated but unspent funds, and at some point the council would see a motion to release those funds or transfer those funds back, depending on what the funding source was. Where it's borrowing, we may not borrow the full amount right away. We could borrow in increments to make sure we're borrowing what we need based on actual costs. Or if the interest rate is good, we could borrow more, but we may not utilize it all. That's one category. If the funding source is free cash, which it's not here, so I won't dwell on it, but if it's free cash and it's unspent, a motion would be made to release that money back into the general fund when it's not used. So there's flexibility in the lines to reallocate to different projects. And so for the parking lot, the estimation is that with the $80,000, we could do the non-ADA components of the parking lot. And with an additional roughly $30,000, we could support that project on the ADA-specific components of the work. So as was pointed out, if we get to the end of this fiscal year and we still have 21 money appropriated, that's where we'll start to spend. We'll spend the oldest first and move forward so that we continue to have a balance of funds available to support not just the identified projects, but any new needs or projects that may present themselves. So that's the interplay between the two. We say slated for, that's as we sit here, these folks have identified those projects and projected a cost. If a project need changes or cost is reduced, that funding can be utilized for something else within the umbrella of ADA.
Okay. So then I think then my other questions would be more related to operationally how decisions are made than the expenditure of these capital funds. I clearly exhausted all of those questions that I feel like I can ask at this time.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment? Councilor Clary, was there a comment?
I thought I should be clear that while I recognize that the parking lot is in need of repair, the scope of need in this town for many things is incredibly great. And I just can't see how $80,000 should be prioritized for the town hall parking lot when I know of the depth of need all over town that to me seems greater. So this, I don't have any authority to reallocate. If I did, I would take the $80,000 and I would put it in the school capital budget. But even if I didn't think the schools were the greatest need at this time, there are needs for vehicles that have been put forward by the DPW. There's needs in the police station. There's needs for sidewalks that residents constantly are asking me for. All of these things are legitimate. The parking lot itself is legitimate. But I think that this town has greater needs in other places, and so I cannot support the $80,000 for the parking lot at this time.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. So, I am okay with the allocations, amounts, and the approach and the reasons behind. What I'm still having a difficult time with, again, is putting down all this work and putting down a nice, clean, full surface around the town hall parking lot with the possibility, great possibility, of it being torn up within a very short amount of time following it due to the construction or proposed construction of the two JFK building for the regional dispatch center. So if someone could talk through that concern, my ears are open.
So I think that Director McGurty or Mr. Thompson can, but my recollection of the conversation we've had to date on this is that it is highly unlikely that the modifications to do JFK would require any work in the parking lot area or would interrupt or disrupt any work done, but Director McGurty can certainly expand upon that.
Scheduled work, the work that would be involved with 2 JFK is directly behind the building that we look out here and see. And there's an area that you would leave without doing any of the work. You just leave it until we get the appropriations and we get the approval, and we're looking at June, I believe, to hear back. And that work could be segregated and leaving that space directly behind the building, roughly about 1,200 square feet, 800 to 1,200 square feet. We would get a better idea once the appropriations were approved, and that's the area that would be left untouched so that it would not be affected by any of the construction, and the rest of the parking area around the town hall could be completed. So there would be minimal disruption, and we would not have to rip up any of the new parking pavement that went down.
Okay, well, that's a new angle. So you've gone back and you've taken a look at that, and I appreciate you taking our comments, or in this case, my particular comment, and thinking that through about how can we, it's a very similar concern. I know the DPW runs into, and the Highway Department runs it all the time whenever there's a request for, because there's a moratorium on our newly laid roads, that there's a moratorium for any kind of gas or any other excavation work from a public utility to come in within the first 5 years, I believe it is. Yep, roughly 5 years moratorium.
5 to 10, depending on the...
Yeah, okay, all right. So, in this particular case, our parking lots are not as heavily traveled, I would think. But then again, I might be surprised by some of those numbers that are coming in and off of this site on a daily basis that may rival, regular roadways, secondary roadways anyways. So, that was my main concern. It was how... why are we going to spend all this money, put that work in there? So my first concern's been answered. You talked about the potential work that would be done to improve the drainage on the parking lot, which definitely needs to be looked at. So I'm happy to hear that, and that right now you're in a pretty minimal cost impact if you were to run into something based on the fact that you're augmented with internal resources. The second piece, of course, what Mr. McGurty just explained. So what would you do? Would you not perform any work whatsoever there? I mean, I would assume as part of the assessment and any kind of drainage, that in conjunction with understanding what that building, its drainage needs, there may be something that's going to either run into the existing drainage in that building, that is the new addition, which is going to house in it the 2 handicap restrooms, correct? That's the idea? Because there isn't any other handicap restrooms in that building presently?
That is correct. There are no restrooms in the building now.
Right.
It will contain an elevator, and it will have also a means of egress stairwell.
Yep.
Will be part of the addition.
But you wouldn't be, is there any other excavation that has to tie into public utilities? Or would
no.
What's existing in the building?
What's existing in the building does not run out through the parking lot.
Gotcha. Thank you.
It runs
Again.
directly to...
Okay. So I'm going to take your assessment on that, and I'll be honest with you. I was ready to vote no on this because of that purpose, and I do agree with my fellow members who feel as if that there should be, to an extent, I agree. We only have so much money that we're able to allocate around as a town. There's so much need. And I could talk to you about the calls I get from my customers, my constituents, pardon me. I am in the customer service business in one way or another. But, those are kind of tasks that we're going to have to handle. We're going to have to handle those tasks in some other means. But, having worked in this building a number of years, having traversed over this parking lot for decades, coming here to meetings, yes, I would agree that we need to do something with that parking lot, and if we can do it in one fell swoop, that would be better. If it can be done in conjunction with the new construction, without interrupting and tearing up that good work, even better. So, I think my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So, I'd like to ask if there are any further questions or comments concerning motion 22007, General Fund Capital Plan request. No. No. Okay. So, at this point, do we have a motion?
Before a motion, can I
Yes.
ask a question of the committee? So we would be voting on a motion for the entire package?
007 will be just for the items contained in the general fund, which we have been discussing this evening, ADA, Fire Department, DPW, Parks and Recreation, etc.
And it would be for all of it or none of it?
All of it or none of it, unless there is a motion to delete anything from it. We, as members of the committee, can make a motion for any one of these individual motions, example 007, which is the general fund. If you had a problem with an item and didn't feel as if it was justified for spending, you can make a motion to say that I vote for the package, the motion with the exception of item X for X amount.
Okay.
Correct?
If we're going to be voting on Order 2207 at this time, if there was a member who did not want to include an item, it has to become a favorable motion. Someone has to make a favorable motion. I make a favorable motion.
So it's a two-step motion?
To accept item number 2007 in the amount of and deduct that amount.
That would be the way to do it.
Whatever the total capital is, and then state what the amount, the thing that you're reducing. As you all know, this is a committee. All you're doing is making favorable recommendation or an unfavorable recommendation, which would be a favorable recommendation that is not supported. That becomes the unfavorable recommendation. But that's it. Then the full council on the day that we're going to discuss this will have the opportunity to hear all the comments once again, and they can either accept the committee's recommendation or vote it the way they so choose with the majority.
Make sure that I understand this correctly. It's not the purview of the committee to make a deletion, but rather just a favorable or unfavorable.
With a recommendation to delete whatever item you want to delete would be a proper motion.
Make the motion unfavorable for motion X
with the exception of whatever.
Okay. Thank you.
Given that
Okay.
can you tell me the total sum and
I don't have that thought.
So if I may, the motion before this committee is to appropriate the sum of $10,368,000 to pay the cost of the enumerated capital projects, which are the projects that we have discussed over the course of the last several meetings on this matter. And it would be to authorize, again, the borrowing to support the same. That's the motion.
Within the motion, they could make a caveat of a recommendation with the exception of an item. That's their recommendation.
Jim, could you speak into the microphone,
I'm
please?
sorry.
I think that the appropriate way to do it would be to amend the motion, which would, I think the motion is the motion. So you're either voting to send it back with a favorable recommendation or not. If there's going to be a change to the motion, procedurally, I think you have to amend it and then send the amended motion back. And I suppose the full council could do what they will. I will say, however, where this involves borrowing, I want to make sure that whatever leaves this body and returns to the full council is correct, because I don't want us to be in a position where we're approving borrowing that bond counsel subsequently tells us was done incorrectly, and therefore we have to re-engage the process. I have some concern, which I feel is appropriate to note on the record at this time, with modification. We have heard from the department heads that have evaluated the town's needs, that is within their responsibility and their obligation to this community, and these are the projects that they have identified as being necessary at this time for the reasons that have been stated, and these are the categories of funding that they are relying on as we look forward into spending in fiscal year 23. My preference is to ensure that this gets voted correctly. If it is the will of this committee to refer back to the full council with some modification, procedurally I want to make sure that is done right to avoid any mishaps down the road. That said, I don't want to delay this any further because what is happening is we have other expenditures that fall within these requested appropriations that quite frankly are being delayed as we move through the process. So if any member of the committee is inclined to seek a modification or reduction of the request, I think my ask would be that we table this matter again to ensure that that can be done correctly, if that is the action that this body is intended to take. But I ask that with the caveat that it be taken up and voted before we meet on the 17th, so whatever leaves this committee can be addressed and considered by the full council when we meet next week.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, a motion could be made for the full amount, what, $10,368,000?
Yes.
$10,368,000, a favorable motion. It becomes seconded, and then if the committee wants to make adjustments, they vote unfavorably. They do not support the motion. Then at the council meeting, because the full body has the opportunity to have presented to them the full motion as it was initially presented, to weigh in on that. Because you remember, a committee cannot add money to items, the council. So if it's an unfavorable motion, then during your presentation to the full council, you will say, we voted unfavorably because of X, Y, Z, and at that time you make the recommendation, we feel that X, Y, Z should be cut back, and then the full council either can agree with your motion, your recommendation to cut that out, or not. The other 6 members can still support the $10,368,000, even against your.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate you providing that as an option. You know, we certainly want to do this in the most clean, straightforward process as possible. And I know that the members of this committee take a great amount of pride in representing the people of Braintree in our responsibility as the approver of allocation of funds. We have a tremendous amount of respect for the department heads in this town, the work and efforts and their assessments. Their level of professionalism is outstanding. But what we have here is just simply differences of opinion and approach and how the monies can be allocated. And whatever the will of this board is, the majority of this board, personally, I think the full council is not in a position, we're not going to be voting as a full council, or we won't be meeting as a full council until the 17th. That perhaps it may be an idea for us to table this motion this evening. We do have tomorrow evening to vote, as well as we do not have a meeting tomorrow.
It's not on the agenda.
Excuse me?
We need 48 hours.
All right, so prior to the 17th meeting.
Yeah,
we have that adequate time to legally
the will
post.
of the board to get clarification, a motion to table until
Monday,
May 16th at 6 o'clock would be the appropriate motion. And I will adjust the meeting motion to reflect that.
Okay, very good, thank you, Clerk Casey. So, do we have a motion?
I would like to move that, I'd like to make a motion for an unfavorable recommendation for Order 22006. sorry. I would like to move that we make an unfavorable recommendation for Order 22007 at this time.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Nay. Okay,
Okay, and then that leaves Order 22006.
correct.
Correct?
So do we have a motion for Order 22006?
I would like to move that we make a favorable recommendation for Order 22006.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Clerk Casey.
okay, that motion is correct. The first motion is incorrect. You have to make a favorable motion and vote against a favorable motion. So your first motion for 007 needs to be, even though you're going to vote against it, I'm making a favorable recommendation for order number 22007. You get a second. All in favor? In this case, there was one favor, and the other two would then oppose, vote negatively. Okay. Motions become all in a positive tone. Okay, so if you could restate that first motion.
In light of this correction, I would like to make a motion for a favorable recommendation for Order 22007.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Oppose.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, there you go. That's the proper motion.
All right, so we have done that housekeeping. Thank you. All right. Okay, so let's move along. Then this evening, the new business, 22025, FY 2023 operating budget, and we will be discussing all public works, sewer, water, storm water, as well as motion 22027, Mayor, fiscal year 2023 budget, continuation of revolving funds. Do we have a motion to take that off the table?
So moved.
All right, we have a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, so, first up, Chief of Staff Todd, please.
Thank you, everybody. So what we have before you this evening as it relates to the FY23 operating budget are several programs, all of which fall within the DPW. I want to thank Town Auditor Sean McGoldrick, who provided some questions with regards to these accounts, responses to which were provided in advance of this evening's hearing. We have a lot of representatives with us tonight from the DPW. First and foremost, Director Jim Arsenault, Assistant Directors Ben Hulk and John Thompson, who we've heard from this evening, Facilities Director Mike McGurty, Waterworks Superintendent Lou Dutton, Rob DeVito, Jeff Poons, and Chris Griffin, all of whom are extremely qualified and capable, I'm sure, to address any questions that the committee has with regards to these programs. You were provided detailed descriptions of not only the incredible work that DPW, which includes many, many, many unsung heroes within this community, does day in and day out, but also highlighting some of the changes reflected in their FY23 proposal, most of which relate to kind of replacement of positions and moving of funding without actually changing the funding amounts themselves, just to more appropriately align with the responsibilities of each of those positions. Also, just as a reminder, as I think was mentioned, we do have two revolving funds within the DPW operating, and then when we get to water, we have a new revolving fund that falls under that department's purview. With that, I think we can simply open it up to questions from the committee, and I'm just going to excuse myself for one moment while we do that.
Thank you. Okay, first up, I'm going to ask Councilor Flaherty if she has any questions, initial questions.
Certainly. So one of the things in this budget overall that I've been paying attention to in particular this year has to do with overtime. And this is not a major issue for the DPW, but your totals for overtime in FY 2019 were $406,639, and in 2020 it was $299.97, and in 21 it was $367.084, and in 22 it was $195.557, and this year is $234.365. So it kind of hovers between $200,000 and $400,000 roughly in that last 5 years. And I'm just curious, like, because it's not the same every year, but the fluctuations aren't wild. What can you shed on how you manage overtime among the departments?
Well, typically for the overtime, events come about, and sometimes there's more overtime during the year because of conditions that increase the amount of activity we have to do on the weekends or extra opportunities. Also, just so you're aware, some of the overtime, like Mike McGurty's done and stuff like that, where it actually is helpful to have some additional overtime, because if we hired contractors to do said work, they would be substantially higher cost. And so there's times like when you see in this room all the work that we've done, painting the walls and all that stuff, some of that work is done at night and able to be done at a much more reasonable cost than because they have normal duties that they have to do. And so having that extra overtime sometimes helps get those jobs done that couldn't be done in the foreseeable future, and we're able to expedite that versus having a contractor come in and do that work. And so that's helped quite a bit. We've seen examples like the American Legion building and a bunch of other things throughout town that we've been able to do to address and expedite projects. So sometimes a little bit of the additional money is helpful for the overtime, but we try to balance it and make sure that we do have some extra opportunities, but we do try to balance it so we don't put a pressure on the overall budget. So I hope that answers your question.
In some of the other departments, some of the reasons for having a lot of overtime expenditures in any given year has to do with people who are out for one reason or another. Illness, largely. And so your department doesn't struggle with that?
Well, I mean, sometimes if we have someone out, we tend to, it's not like some of the other unions have mandatory positions that have to be filled in certain allocations, like the police and fire, I believe, have some of those allocations. Whereas in DPW, we really don't have that, so we can have our own staff kind of just cover the other person. Sometimes there's like a higher pay to a particular individual, because if someone senior is out, they get a little differential, but it's not as significant as some of the other departments.
Okay, that pretty much answers that question. You have a couple of line items. One is on page 68 under highway for patching, and one is on page 71 for sidewalks. So under patching, I'll give you a second.
Yeah, give me a second. I gotta put my glasses on.
I gotta take mine off. So
I'm getting old. 68?
Yeah, page 68.
Okay.
You have under highway a line item called patching, and I am just trying to clarify what you're patching using funds from that line item. Is it the road only, or is it also...
So patching... Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Is it also sidewalks and parking lots, or is it something else altogether?
No, patching is typically when you have a pothole and you need it to get repaired. That's typically what it is, but I don't see why they couldn't use some of that for a sidewalk, but typically they use it for if there's a pothole, especially after a winter, you get a lot of frost thaw and all that. It creates a lot of potholes, and so it's a significant amount of work trying to get that done. So
under highway, it's largely for pothole repairs. And then on page 71, which only has one line item because it's for sidewalks, is that for patching sidewalks?
Yes, it's repair of sidewalks. So that, so if there's trying to make it traversable as well as they can. I know it's, that maybe not perfect sometimes, but they try to do the best they can trying to get the sidewalk, especially if there's, and usually what they do is if there's a severe issue, like where it's a trip hazard or something, they take care of at least filling it. I know it's not perfect as a brand new sidewalk, but they do try to improve it to where it's at least safe.
Okay. I think on page 71 is only $29,400. Right, that's your sidewalk repair budget.
Yes, yep.
So it wouldn't pave more than a few feet, would it?
Well, it's not a complete reconstruction, so if it was a complete reconstruction, you're right, it wouldn't give you much at all. But
Right.
with patching, in other words, you're taking the sidewalk and maybe a section out of it and replacing that, or you're resurfacing a small portion, or just filling in the holes, basically.
Okay.
So it's not a wholesale improvement, it's just a minor repair.
Also on page 71, you have a line item there marked street survey, and I just would like some clarification on what that is.
What page is that?
71? Oh, I'm sorry. It's not. It's under 68, under
Okay,
highway.
right.
I rearranged my items.
Okay.
Managed to confuse myself.
So which one? 68.
Yep.
What's the particular item again? Sorry.
Street survey. I think it's survey. It's SUR.
553006.
It's surfacing.
Oh, surfacing.
Yeah.
So 51,000 for street surfacing, but that's different from the capital plan money that we have already discussed.
Yeah, so that wouldn't be pothole repair, that would be wholesale improvements, right? Oh, Ben can define it closer.
So, through the chair, we use that for a handful of things: so street surface treatment, some of the road striping, some of the road pavement painting. We do some mastic treatments, which is, it's more than not a seal coating, but some of that to keep some sections of road together around manholes, catch basins, things like that. So there's a number of different items that it's not a wholesale engineering project resurface. It's kind of spot treatments as they arise throughout town.
Okay. I think I understand the distinction. I just misunderstood what it was to begin with. Okay. On page 72, it talks about street lighting, and for the past several years now, we have had $300,000 allocated for street lighting, and before that, we had $415,200 allocated. So,
yeah, so I can...
we cut the amount that we were spending on street lighting by $115,000 and then never put it back.
I think, if you don't mind, if Ed probably can
I
answer
am
that.
happy to hear the answer from anybody.
Well, several years ago, had taken on a project to basically retrofit all of the street lights in town, and there was a considerable savings in the utility cost, the electric cost. What they did was they continued to charge us the same base fee until they recouped the cost of doing the retrofitting. And you'll see that the cost is coming down to the $300,000, so that when the retrofitting cost has been paid off, what we'll be paying is a much lower utility cost for the street light electricity townwide.
If I can answer that. Ed, I think they actually are done now. So they're officially done with the improvements, so that is now the final reduced cost. The two, yes.
So $300,000 is what it costs to light the town, not to repair and replace lights?
No, it's actually for just the lighting and, all the maintenance and everything. They take care of the lighting, except for there are a few lights, specialty lights that we maintain, we have to maintain on our own, but other than that, they maintain them, so.
So it stands out to me because everything else costs more year over year, but this has been very steady. But that is because of Bell managing for us, right?
Yes, so Val, like as Ed had said, had come to an agreement where they would keep it at a set price until it was done, and then, but now, from now forward, I believe the prices will change and fluctuate a little bit more each year.
I see.
So it was kind of an agreement that was locked in, and now it's just about done, and then they'll start to increase the maintenance fees over time. Hopefully not much.
Just to add, would it be another factor that these new lights just last longer?
Yeah, the LEDs, so they last quite amount of time, and they're a lot more energy efficient, and it's great for the environment, and it's good for a lot of reasons.
Good for the pocketbook, too.
Yes.
Better.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
On page 74, it's under snow and ice.
Yes.
There is a line that says contract S.
Yes. So those are, those are contract services. So those are any contracts that we have when we're doing work. So there could be contracts like we could have, that's the one where we basically hiring contractors to come in and take care of the roadways, help us out with the roadways. So what we do is every winter we have contractors that we line up with contracts, and we prepare for the winter. We hope there's no snow, but there almost certainly is most of the time. So what happens is when there's an event, we call them out. They assist. First, we try to minimize the use of them as much as we can. So we do internally. We go out, we salt the roads, we take care of the roads as best we can. But when it gets to a point where either we know in advance that there's going to be a large storm, or there's something that we're questionable about, we'll eventually pull those contracts and call those people and tell them to come in and assist us. And so they help us maintain the roads during winter events. And that's usually the highest cost item. So the labor part of our staff are usually much, much cheaper and more affordable to utilize.
Right. I understand how complicated it is to plan for snow and ice.
But we can't, in fairness, we can't keep people on the whole year just for the winter, so
right.
We really have to pull those resources in. It wouldn't be cost effective, so.
Okay.
Although we wouldn't mind it.
So that is different, however, from page 75, where you have a line for casual employment. That is under environmental affairs and waste collection.
Yes.
So contract services is when you contract out.
Yes.
And I just didn't understand how casual employment contrasts with that.
All right, so do you want to answer that one, Ben?
So casual employees are individuals that are actually employed by the town on a limited basis. So kind of utilized when needed. They're typically not benefited positions. And you see casual employees in a variety of the different divisions within the DPW, and they're used to supplement the full-time workforce.
So like part-time. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And I'm going to skip right over trash because I know that Councilor Reynolds has some questions on that, so I'll leave that to him.
Okay.
But I was curious why on page 77, town hall maintenance is broken out, which was curious to me because we have so many municipal buildings, but town hall is separated out as its own item.
Yes, that was, since I started working there, that was always separate. I don't really have a solid reason why they separated it that way, but it is funding that we utilize for taking care of this building. But, it could have been put into one pot of money, sure.
Okay. I would be very interested to know, and I don't expect you to have this tonight, but how this funding stacks up against what we spend to maintain any other municipal building in town. 74 Pond Street, any of the others.
I do know that Mike McGurty did put some stuff together in the past relative to the maintenance requirements of buildings. So I think we do have some information that we could, give to you in those
I
regards.
would be very interested in that if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you. And then the very last question has to do with recreation and community events, which is on page 78.
Okay.
Here we have a line for $75,000 that's called repairs. And I mean, DPW does lots of repairs in lots of departments, but I was wondering what you could identify would be a repair that would fall under that category. Recreation and community events. What is slated for repair in that category?
Yeah, so in the past, it used to be, we would ask for capital every year, and it was, a lot of times stuff, we would try the best we could to get the funding, but if we couldn't get the funding, then we wouldn't be able to improve the parks and all that stuff. So we asked at that time to bring it into the operating budget because it is more of an operating budget. It's more like when you have the fields, and you could have put materials down for the fields if you have to do routine maintenance. We have sometimes when certain types of contact on the courts and stuff have to be upgraded or maintained. We need that money basically every year, because when we get those funds, when we get a repair on one or a renovation on another, we have to then rotate it between all the different fields within the town. So we're constantly repairing or renovating all of the fields. One is, it's also just regular time, but it's also like in the winter time when you have, the frost thaw and damage to certain things we have to take care of, and also just the regular replenishment of the fields and parks and all that stuff. So that's kind of where that's from.
So it sounds like it largely covers the care and maintenance of athletic fields?
Yes, and then also parks and anything else we have in the town that we maintain on the grounds. So, but it can also be, it's any type of recreational activity, because it's in Parks and Rec, and that's what the fund money is dedicated for. But usually it's the maintenance of the fields and the parks, and also, in some minor repairs to things, so.
Okay, those are my questions, so
Okay.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Maglio, question?
I do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
My questions are around they're pretty discreet actually. So where we see things like pesticides and fertilizer and those kinds of materials, are there any policies around spending those that are safest for the environment, safest for nature, have the least amount of impact? So the stormwater practices that we are sort of advocating for residents and educating residents about, are those practices also followed within these different departments?
Yes, we always try to make sure we use the most de minimis type of, weed control or pest control as we can, and we also have people that are certified to provide that treatment and to make sure that they're using it appropriately as well. So.
Okay,
yeah.
That's great to hear.
Okay.
And then my other question is with regard to the capacity that I was told we have around being able to track, specific to snow removal, people being able to, or DPW dispatch, whoever that entity is, being able to tell where a road is in the schedule of when it will be plowed. And is that something that we would see that capacity in this operating budget?
Yes, so that would be, it's a winter activity, so some of the funds are within the winter and snow and ice operations. So that would be in that section. And then there are some during the year we do have continue it, so it would be some would be out of the regular general fund. So it's kind of a combination. So in other words, the main purpose of it is for that I contracted for. I mean, the DPW contracted for is for the wintertime activities, to see when the trucks are coming and to be able to tell us, okay, someone did plow that road at 2:05 p.m., so, there has been someone there. Because, to be honest with you, in the wintertime, you can't tell, when you get a big heavy snow event, you would think that it wasn't plowed. So, so we need to know that, hey, someone did go down that road and it was at least plowed one time. I mean, obviously, if it's coming 2 inches an hour, we have to get back there, but, at least we know when it's been plowed and when the next person should be coming by. But we also, the tracking devices don't get removed, so they're still there during the whole year. But we just use it to, help us, give a better understanding of where people are and, what activities people are doing, mostly in the winter, but sometimes during the year too as well.
And I'm not sure exactly where it falls in here, but I will look for it. I'm wondering, because we have that capacity, is there any funding, or is there a need for funding? There probably isn't, but for letting residents know that we have that service available to them?
Yeah,
or is that not really for
No,
residents?
it's not for the public. It's more just for coordination of making sure that the roads are maintained, that's all. We don't really put that out there as for the general public. It's just for us to make sure. But if anybody wants to call us and ask us and say, has my road been plowed or what's going on? And it's also very dynamic too. It's more of a tool than just an asset to look at, because you wouldn't understand it. You have to kind of know like how it works and how it interacts, because for instance, like a regular truck might go by there and then you wouldn't know, you think that's a plow, but it's not. So we would have to know the differences between them. So it's more of a technical type resource than just like a plain, oh, here's where they are, you know what I mean? Because it's kind of involved. Like I said, some of the trucks would show a false, positive, so you have to know it. And the software is a little glitchy too, so you have to kind of figure it out, saying, oh, well, they meant to go here, and it kind of moved over a little bit. So it's some interpretation. We know how to do it, but, the general public obviously may not, understand it as well. That's all. So.
I also would just note to that regard, before those devices could be installed, that was something that was subject to negotiations with the union that those employees fall into.
Yeah.
So it's just another by way of background. Before any type of GPS can be implemented, there's a certain bargaining obligation that comes with that. So there's certain parameters around the use of the data that were consumed in those negotiations as well.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting background piece. What I'll say about that is that when I started, I was, it was January 4th. I had officially been sworn in for a day, and I would say that was probably that's the most, that's under my column of what I get calls about. They haven't plowed my street.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that you're used to getting that too. I'm sure that we can all feel the frustration of feeling like our street wasn't done or wasn't done enough. But that is certainly a capacity that I started letting people know about, because it was a question I brought to the mayor's office around people wanting to know, and was told that there is that capacity in the mayor's office for people to contact Stephen O'Leary to find that out. So,
you're right.
So is that something that people can do? Is that contract in here, and people, if they are concerned, can contact and find out where they are on the list?
Oh, certainly. They can call. Anybody can call any time. In the wintertime, I'm pretty much 24/7 in there, and my staff are. So if anybody has any questions about where they are and they have any concerns, we answer every phone call that comes through. I mean, sometimes they don't like the answer, but, because sometimes we have to say, hey, they're in queue, they're coming to you soon, but they want it to be that minute, and unfortunately they have to wait a little while. But, and we try the best we can to try to get to them as soon as we can. But they're welcome to call anytime, absolutely. They have the highway department number. It's always displayed and given out whenever there's a storm event by the mayor's office, and then Steve is welcome to help out too as well. Anybody can give that information. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you very much, Councilor Maglio. Okay, really quick, Director Arsenault, just a quick question on maintenance. All your maintenance operations are now, for vehicle that is, vehicle maintenance operation, that's all under facilities?
Yes.
Right, okay, good. And I'm just just looking for, I had the number, I thought. I just wanted to take a quick look at the number and maintenance. I don't know why I can't find it here. I know that you've brought it all in-house, you've brought it in-house and consolidated all under the facilities team, and the assistant, I believe the assistant facilities director is the overall maintenance supervisor, if you will, of that group.
So, when I first came here, there wasn't any facilities director at all, and
Correct.
but since then, we've hired Mike McGurty, and he's done a great job, and what happened was, during that process, we started off with basically, two guys kind of doing some work.
If you recall, I'm very familiar with that process.
I thought maybe you want to, but anyway, so.
Well, no, this is just my question, that, so, do you see that program growing over the last few years? I mean, is it continuing to pay dividends as far as cost savings for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Good.
we've seen tremendous amounts of money through the years, and Mike's done a fantastic job of taking some older buildings and renovating them at much reduced cost by using internal staff instead of contracting out. And he's, bringing a lot of value to some of these older buildings that really had a lot of issues with them. And, one had to wonder whether we're going to keep them or not. And bring with our own in-house staff and a lot of ingenuity, they're able to bring them up to really good standards. So, throughout the community.
Must be that good military training Mr. McGurty got.
That's right.
Drive on. All right. My next question is for environmental affairs and waste collection.
Okay.
So we know that there's quite a bit of flexibility and value that gets created in that part of the DPW, environmental affairs and waste collection. It's been very well run through the years. And I know that the use of casual employees has always been a valuable and flexible tool for the efficiency of that department.
Yes.
I'm just a little bit curious about the increase this year over last year, and how that's just, if you could just give us a little bit of that.
Sure. We'll just get the appropriate
Would
date.
Mr. Coons?
Sure. Yeah.
Mr. Kuntz to join us, at
Sure.
the open mic over here.
He knows a lot more about it than I do.
Right.
Way too much.
Good evening, Mr. Coons.
Through the chair. There are several changes in the DEP mandates that are coming up in fiscal '23. They're going to require more training on the streets, and it's going to require more labor at the recycling center.
Got it.
And those have to do with waste bans in two areas that are going to affect us, and that's mattresses and box springs. Can no longer be thrown in the trash. They have to be recycled. The other is textiles. Can no longer go in the trash. They have to be recycled. The third thing that's happening is the DEP is clamping down on transfer stations accepting construction and demolition material. And there's a significant amount of material that flows through Braintree. Some of it through the recycling center, some of it curbside. And we need to divert that as a community, or have residents diverted to other facilities. So again, there's going to be communications, training, and auditing and monitoring that have to be done. So I plan for one additional part-time person, if you will, Schedule G, to get us through this year on that.
Great. Okay. And that makes sense to me. I remember this box spring and mattress was a pretty big issue at the state level for a few years, and that, whether or not the solution is really what works well, there's a mandate.
A mandate says we've got to make it work well.
Right. There is a mandate. And in the textiles piece, things like clothing, that nature?
Clothing, any material of any kind. Shoes, coats, clothing, bedding.
Okay.
Any of that material is now a part of a waste ban. Fortunately, we've set up over the last several years the collection boxes at the schools, at the center, and some of the churches, where I think we're going to meet the letter of the law in terms of the mandate. But there's still a considerable amount that goes into trash cans, and we need to inspect those at curbside.
Sure.
And also control it at the recycling center with the black plastic bags full of whatever.
Right. And the construction material, I know, has always been a big issue, not only from an environmental standpoint, but also, I think, just its tonnage.
Right. We are one of the only communities that accepts amounts of construction and demolition material. And DEP has turned their head on that until this coming year. So effective July 1st, Covanta will be monitored, audited, and they have to have cameras and or a full-time person on the tipping floor that'll be looking for this kind of material.
Coming out of the curbside pickup trucks?
Curbside and recycling center.
Okay.
And that's not just our community. Every community that delivers material there is going to be monitored.
I see. Okay, that's significant. Okay, thank you. And let's see in transportation there's a huge increase in transportation. Is this part of I think we're coming toward the end of a contract with our curbside pickup? Is this anything to do with that?
The biggest part of that increase is the mattress program.
Okay.
And the second largest increase is in the area of the actual recycling and trash carts. They're reaching the end of their 10-year life expectancy, and we're not planning on replacing them, but we will be repairing them unless there's a significant breakage to the can. So those costs are going to start to escalate, but certainly a lot less than spending over $1 million to replace them.
Great. And good story here, at least temporarily, I guess, is it's the fluctuation of the recycling market itself. I see you've got a negative 21%.
Right.
Is that something to do with the way the markets are working these days?
There's several factors that go into it. Obviously, it is, to your point, it is market driven. When we started to put the budget together, we reached out to processors to find out what they're predicting. They don't have a crystal ball. They don't know what the market is going to do, but they suggested we'd be somewhere around the $50 a ton mark. Right now, it's coming in at about $10, so we're already seeing some savings that for this fiscal year. Whether or not that'll carry into the next fiscal year, nobody knows.
Right. That's unfortunate, but okay, thank you. And just my last question on this is that I know it has been a point of discussion among some counselors and residents for some time. We have had a static trash fee in this community. When I say that, it has been $150, I'm going to say 15 years at least. Somewhere, is that your recollection?
$150 for the last 8 years.
Last 8 years. Prior to that, what was 140?
Yes.
140.
No. It started out at 170, and we took it down to 150, and senior citizen discount of 90.
Right, and I think that the reason it was taken down had to do with the positive effect of the then
recycling in particular.
Then recycling, which has done a 180 on us.
Right.
Okay, so I just, with some of these larger increases that you're incurring, you're able to balance your budget on an annual basis? Do you need assistance? Is there...
If I could kind of jump in front of that, there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not the trash fee could be increased.
Right.
We've been in a very favorable position with Sunrise Scavenger for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
This past year, the year that we're currently in, there was no increase because we extended our contract by 2 years, so there was no increase for this year. Next year, instead of 2% per year, it's going to be a 3.9%, so they're going to catch up. But there's no fuel surcharges, there's been no additional labor costs involved other than what we've requested. And looking ahead at the next fiscal year, where we're going to have to either do an RFP or negotiate with a vendor, because we're not required in the environmental area to do an RFP. I foresee significant increases. So rather than have an increase now with coming out of COVID, all the extra expenses that residents are faced with, we decided to put some additional money in our budget and then look ahead 2 years out because we're going to have a significant impact on labor, on equipment costs, and I think you're going to see a significant rise in the trash collection component of it.
Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, I think it's a pretty good bargain we have as residents in this town to have, on a weekly basis, our trash and recycle picked up for really what is the cost of a cup of coffee.
Less than a cup of coffee.
Less than a cup of coffee. We're having our trash and recycles picked up. So, and everything that you do, I mean, you have done, you've done an incredible job through the years in managing this, and really, I think a big part of that has been your anticipation of watching the market, so thank you. That's all I have for the environmental and trash collection. Oh, and I'm sorry. Yes, go right ahead.
I'm still here.
I would just like to comment on that I agree with the incredible job. I wonder about the level of education and outreach and awareness around recycling policies and practices. I know that I strive to get the ticket that says I've done a good job recycling. That means a lot to me and to others because it means we're following along on doing things that are good for our neighbors, good for the earth. Does that continue to be in here, the inspections of the curbside containers, the information that gets sent out around good practices?
Absolutely. We've got additional outreach already on the table, ready to go out with the waistbands. We've got to have more education, and I am putting an additional person on the street this summer because of those things, and we'll be able to reach more residents with information.
That's excellent. Okay. Great. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, before Mr. Coons departs from the microphone, the 2 revolving funds associated with the DPW this evening do relate to trash and recycling. So if I might ask if there are any questions with regards to those. The recycling program has a maximum expenditure of $4,800, and the household hazardous waste has a maximum expenditure of $50,000.
I'll ask any of the members if they have any questions or concerns regarding the revolving funds. I have no question. This looks good. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coons. My next question is actually, let's see. I don't have any questions at this point other than, let's see, I know that we have the Recreation Department. I don't see them on the agenda, but since
Chris is here.
I see Chris. He's hiding back there.
They're not identified separately. They're consumed within the general DPW operating.
Yeah. Okay, so that being said then, the summer programs, I see that we have a pretty good jump in the summer program expenditures this year. So you could address that for us. And welcome, Mr. Griffin.
And that through you to the members. So yes, if I could just provide just a slight history of the last couple of years as regards to some of the programs. In the year 2020, obviously with the pandemic, we significantly reduced our program offerings, and we operated on a extremely small budget. And we obviously didn't have any camps, any playground programs in line with all the public health regulations at the time. Last year, we were able to bring back 2 of our 3 summer camps that we would usually have, and we saw a significant increase in our budget. We were able to restore 3 playground programs out of the usual 6 that we usually have. So the jump in the summer programs for this year represents a nearly full return to full summer programs since the post-pandemic, if you will.
Okay.
We are now up to our full 3 summer camps. We have our kiddos camp, We have our sports camp out of the Doherty Gym, and we have restored our field trippers camp as well. And we are planning to return to 6 playgrounds instead of the 3 we had covered last year. So that is the increase, if you will.
Okay, great. Last year, did you fully employ all of the summer help as well with the waterfront areas, et cetera?
Yes. Sunset Lake was completely staffed with lifeguards, as well as gate attendants, and a caretaker, which we usually have there as well. And then there was a full complement of gate attendants at the splash pad at Watson Park.
Did you experience at all difficulty in filling all your positions?
Not last summer, because as I said, we were operating at about maybe, I'd say 60 to 65, 70% of our usual offerings. So we were able to fill the staffing for the 2 camps. We went into the summer knowing that we were only going to be offering 2 out of our 3 usual camps, only offering 3 out of our 6 playgrounds. So that wasn't in a response to any sort of staffing shortage or anything. We knew how many positions we were going to have to fill, and we were able to adequately fill them. And I will say, particularly after only bringing back, I think we had 2 summer employees with us in the summer of 2020. So many of our employees last summer were more than usual of them were new to the program because we were missing a summer, if you will.
Right.
And if I could just say, we were incredibly impressed with the quality and the dedication of our summer employees last summer, particularly since many of them were new to the program, if you will.
Well, that's good to hear. I know that just the summertime employment, it seems temporary employment has been a difficult situation around the country in different industries. And
if I could, and this is everywhere, obviously, if anybody's watching on TV as their lifeguard certification, we're always happy for lifeguards, but as you mentioned, that is a nationwide issue. People, some people let their lifeguard certification lapse because it's a 2-year certification. So that is always something we want more of, but we were able to adequately meet our needs last summer, and we expect to do so again.
Great. Okay. And let's see if there was one more. This may not have to do with you, but before you go, then I'm going to direct the question to the Chief of Staff. The Bray Way, I'm assuming that is why am I trying to blank on it? Pond Meadow, thank you.
Yep.
Is that correct? That's
Pond Meadow Park?
Bray Way description is Pond Meadow Park. And I'm just curious, there is a 15% change there. I'm wondering, is there some kind of repair work or replacement work or something that's going on?
It was reported that there were certain park-related improvements that needed to be made in order to comply with current regulations and also just cover the increase in general operating costs, and that represents the increase you see.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a real gem down there, and it's good to see that work's still being addressed. So that's all my questions for DPW. Anyone else have anything further? Yes, Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Director Griffin, can you come back?
Sorry about that.
I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is, how is subscription this year to our summer program?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How is subscription this year to our summer program?
Sign-ups have been absolutely terrific. We opened our sports and kiddos camp the first Monday in April, as we usually do. And if I could, just a little aside, as many parents do, they stay up late because our system goes live at midnight on the day. And I actually had my laptop at home, and I saw the numbers just climbing right after midnight on that Monday morning. And a parent said to me a couple of days after, that she said, "Was I the only crazy parent?" And I said, "No, it was full by 7 a.m. pretty much all weeks." And I said, "That's not, you would never, you did the right thing by being there." So we were incredibly impressed, and even our 4th of July week, which is our short week, we were surprised this year. That week, throughout the history of our programs, never fills up. It was filled up that first day. So the response to bringing these programs back has been incredible.
And you handled the field trippers sign-ups differently this year, and I'm very curious to know what the feedback was and how that went.
So the reasoning that was, and I will say that we were actually very pleased how that went yesterday. We were able to pretty much accommodate, I'd say, maybe with an exception or two here and there based on, desire for a certain week, we were able to accommodate pretty much anyone who was in line by 5 o'clock. We did open the sign-ups at 5 o'clock. The reasoning we did it that way was because with the return of field trip camp this year and obviously the anticipated demand, we did have to strictly limit it to 1 week per person. And because of that requirement, the sign-ups do have to take place in person. Because the system we've used for a good number of years doesn't allow that, if you will, to restrict it to just 1 week. So that's why we needed to bring them in and have myself and my colleague Diane, who does a terrific job for us. And we did it in about 2 hours yesterday, and we're very excited to bring that program back.
Great. And the Braintree Community Center for the Arts, does
Yep.
that come under your purview?
It does, yes, and I'm happy to report that we're bringing that out of its COVID hibernation, if you will. We have a couple programs coming up, and the leader, Heidi Hurley, who recently retired as art director for the schools, she was the original chairman of the Arts Center when it first opened up. She's spent a lot more time volunteering up there. Really, she has a great devotion to that, as we all do. But she cares very deeply for the Arts Center, and we're going to have an open house on May 23rd, which is a week from this coming Monday, and some of the instructors will be there offering some information about their programs. So we're really excited we've got some programs coming up over the next couple weeks and couple months that we're really excited to share with the community.
Okay, and considering the popularity of the programs that are offered and the resources that we have and the demand, to what extent do you think that Braintree can look to expand any of those programs in the coming years?
Any particular programs, or are you talking about the Arts Center?
Well, they're all full, right? So all of them could maybe expand. I mean, you would know more than me.
Certainly, absolutely. I'd say for about the past, 10, 15 years, the three big summer programs that we've offered have been the sports, the kiddos, and the field trip camp. Going back, 20, 30 years, there'd be partnerships with, baseball programs, other youth sports programs, some programs. They have, over the past 20, 25 years have done those independently, not through us. We do have a basketball clinic at the Doherty Gym that we're going to be operating in August after our sports camp ends, the first week of August, which is always very popular. So the Arts Center isn't quite in a position yet to offer summer programming this summer, but in conversations with Heidi for summer of 2023, that is something we certainly want to bring back to the Arts Center, a summer programming offering, and that's hopefully something we can bring back for next summer as well.
Great. I think you do a wonderful job. Thank you for answering all my questions.
Thank you, Councilor. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Anything further on DPW, Parks, Recreation? Okay. Thank you. I think we're all set then with the DPW, and we're ready to move on. Water and sewer. So, All right. I'm going to ask the committee members for their questions on water and sewer. So, Member Flaherty.
Oh, I don't have any questions for
No
water and sewer, thank you.
questions on water and sewer. You lucked out there, Mr. Dawes. All right. So, we welcome Director Dutton here this evening. Thank you for joining us. And Councilor Maglio, any questions?
I have no questions for water and sewer.
No questions for water and sewer. All right. Well, aren't I the lucky one? I get to ask the questions. All right. So, I know that there's been some questions that were answered, that were submitted through, in working with the auditor, and I'm just taking just a quick look here. Water and sewer. So, before I ask my questions, provide directly. Okay. All right. He didn't have any of the questions I had, so I'm going to have to ask him. So, far away, right? All right, so...
If I may, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, and I apologize for the interruption, but I did just recall also, shortly before the meeting, we provided a memorandum that updates some of the budget items, one of which specifically relates to the water and sewer program.
Chemicals?
What, I'm sorry?
Chemicals.
Chemicals.
Right,
And
today was the day you had an auction.
An
the bid.
incredible increase
Yes, I
in
saw
the
that.
cost of chemicals that I'm
Well, let's
sure...
talk about that one. That's a good topic.
Great.
So, we understand that because of the explanation was pretty concise, that it's transportation costs, supply chain costs, et cetera, has really driven up the price pretty significantly for you. So this will be a requirement, if I understand the way that you're going to address the funding of it, is through going into the enterprise or into the water fund?
I believe so, yes.
That's correct.
Okay, so, there's ample funds there to cover this at this particular point, so
Yes.
I don't think there's any particular concerns, unless there's any additional comments you want to add. No?
We're going to be adjusting the budget to increase the chemical line in the water in the water budget. And then there'll be a corresponding increase in the water revenue account. And that'll be factored into the water sewer rates going forward.
Great. Okay, terrific. Thank you. All right. So first up is, I believe it gets cut off in the description here, but building repair, there's a 233% increase. So up from 1,500, but the actuals to date are 3,200, up to 5,000. So what building are we talking about there? Is this the one out at the DPW site, or are we talking about the one on Great Pond?
We have the DPW building. We also have some repairs that need to be made down at the water and sewer barn. Mike is getting us quotes. The front doors at 85 Quincy Avenue are very old. A lot of the elderly have problems opening the doors.
Okay.
They're heavy, they're old. We're trying to get those replaced with some lighter, more efficient doors.
That's pretty straightforward. Thank you. I don't have anything in addition to that. Let's see. Under pump stations, emergency repairs, you've had a 26% increase. Can you just... It looks as if you had 28,000 requested in last year's budget. This is page 3, tab G, as in golf.
What we're trying to do is, the sewer pump stations there's a lot of the stations, the pumps are starting to get old, so we're starting to replace those pumps. And so instead of going through capital, we're trying to replace some of these pumps just through the regular line items in the budget.
Okay. And this is the building that's scheduled to be replaced, correct? No?
No, these
No.
are sewer pump stations.
The pump, I'm sorry, you're right. When I think water and sewer buildings, I think the treatment plant. So, thank you. Okay. And vegetation control, you've made a significant cut, 75% in that. Can you give me a little background on...
Yeah, some of the vegetation control on some of the property that we have was done by an outside vendor, but we've since purchased equipment in the past, lawn cutting equipment, so we do a lot of it in-house. So there's really not a need for that much money in that budget.
Great. Okay, that's a good story to tell. And that's just, that has nothing to do with vegetation in the waters like the lake or...
No, these are on some of the sewer easements that we have.
Got it. All right. Thank you. I think that, well, one more. Okay, this one I believe is more from Mr. Spellman, Director Spellman. So this has to do with the bond debt principles, the bond principle, page 6. We're down 55%. What we got coming with what we're due to pay. Can you give us just, in conjunction with the next item, page 7, which is the bond interest on the debt interest of, we're down also another 55%. So my assumption would be this is retiring debt?
Correct. This is dealing on the sewer specifically?
Yes.
Most of the town's debt for sewer is done through the MWRA grant loan program.
Okay.
Projects approved, submitted to the MWRA. They approve the project. Based on the project costs, what they will do is provide us with a 75% grant and then a 25% loan. And that loan has recently been a 10-year loan with 0% interest. So that's why you'll see the sewer interest number being significantly lower than what you'd find in the water budget. But we have been paying off some of the older sewer notes, and that debt service has been coming down.
That's terrific. So this is somewhat associated with the program that's being planned for, that the town the council had approved bonds, I'm going to say back in February, for water and sewer, for the new treatment plant, for the cost of the treatment plant. We had to prove that we had full payment, we could pay for that fully, and then we could apply for this grant, or low-interest loans through the water.
What was approved several months ago was for the the additional projected cost for the water treatment plant.
Right.
These are for the sewer I&I
MWRA
grant loan.
I understand that. What I'm saying is, though, is it a similar type of a program that we're applying for through the state, for these lower grants and these lower interest rates, or is this just something that's completely different?
It's completely different.
Okay.
The sewer I&I program is put together, is through the MWRA to help with the intent is to try to reduce or divert flow.
Where we are a customer of the MWRA for our sewer services.
Correct.
Great. And where we are in a water situation, we are independent with our water. Gotcha. Thank you for that clarity. Okay. All right. That might have been, let's see, one more we have here. No, I don't need to do that. Gasoline, we've talked about gasoline. That is an item that's jumped out. Gasoline and diesel, big time. We understand, with the cost, the way the oil markets have gone and what it's done to your operating budgets is significant. It's very significant. And I'm going to go back to that point in a moment, but I just want to just double check to make sure that I have touched on all of my, okay. There is, in the treatment division, you have a decrease of 75% in equipment repairs. That is page 14. It sounds like a good story. I just want to I want to understand the background on that specifically. what's driving that decrease? Do you need the number?
I don't see a decrease.
All right, I see here, equipment repair. This is line item 7043805, 524006. Equipment repair. You're asking, it's a down from last year's 98,904 to 23,904. Is it just a simple, you know what I'm looking at also? If I had looked at the previous season, you had some kind of major repair, a significant repair.
I think that could have been the VFDs, I believe, that we replaced. Did we put it in that line when we did the emergency transfer?
Yeah, we did. So what happens is we have a reserve fund, so when there's emergencies and or issues that we have to take care of within the water and sewer division, we held, I think, about $125,000 in there in case there's something that comes up. And so if we utilize those funds, then they go into a particular line item that's appropriate for it, and those funds are expended for that use.
Okay.
And so that's usually how it happens.
We had a failure of our VFDs at the treatment plant, so we had to replace those.
Okay.
So that's what that reflects.
So it's a significant component to the treatment plant that had to get replaced, so we just had to do it immediately, and we took care of it.
Okay. All right, and I know the next item is was explained in the auditor's question, pardon me. Page 15 under the meter division, labor and it's cut off. But you're up 53%, and I know that you hired a new meter reader or something?
Yeah, what we did was we had a position in the sewer division, which was a sewer position foreman. And when that gentleman retired, so what we did was we made a senior meter tech position to replace that, so we moved that salary to the meter division.
The full salary of the retired individual into the meter division?
So we reclassed that. It was a W8, and it's now a W5, I believe. So that salary got moved over to the meter division.
Got it. Okay.
That was in concert with the employees and the union, and, it was all negotiated out. So.
And the corresponding decrease is seen in 43605 in the sewer system rehab program in the labor line there. So there was a decrease in that line that corresponds with the increase in this line because there was a position change.
Okay. That's understandable. And then staying on that same page, I moved down to there is 4 consecutive costs starting with wireless, ending with work clothes that have all increased by 50%. Is that something that is also part of the shift, or is there some other reason for the increase of 50%?
Yes, those are all the contractual, the clothing allowance, boot allowance for that particular employee got moved down to the meter division as well.
Okay. Thank you. And I think that might do it for me. Yes, that does it for me.
We also have a revolving fund new to the list this year for water meters that would fall within Mr. Dutton's purview. So if there are any questions with regards to that, I would ask that they be Mr. Dutton be inquired of now.
I'm going to ask, before I ask my question on that, I'll ask my fellow members if they have any questions on the Public Works water meter revolving fund. No? Good to go? Council Maglio?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Can you give us a little overview, the reasoning behind creating this and how you're working it?
Sure. What we found was a lot of the commercial meters that are in the town, so residential meters we supply to the residents,
The commercial meters are the responsibility of the business owners. So a lot of these meters, as they age, they need to be replaced. So when they call Thai Sales in order to get pricing on their meters, our pricing is anywhere between $1,200 to $1,800 cheaper. So by getting this approved, what we can do is we can help the commercial owners by giving them our costs on the meters. So we would purchase the meters, they would in turn reimburse us, and we put the money back into the account, and just that way it gives them an incentive to replace the meters, because a lot of times what we're seeing is they just don't do it. This also, with this new meter program, with the style of meters that we're putting in, they have to have, right now, they have to have them tested every year. With the new meters now that we are providing to them, that goes away. So now they no longer have to test them, they just have to be replaced every 15 years.
Is there any kind of a spot check of any type, or is it you're able to pick that up through the data you collect?
We have the meter data in our system, so we know exactly how old these meters are. So, we have a good idea. There's probably right now about 500 commercial meters that need to be addressed.
Okay.
So this is a good way. It's an incentive for them, to get them replaced, and it helps us in the same way.
Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate that explanation and what drove, the creation of this revolving account. It's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That is it for my questions for water and sewer. Let's see. We have, just do a quick check here. It looks like, I think we have covered all of our questions this evening for public works, sewer, water, stormwater. And we've addressed these revolving funds. So I think yes, go right ahead. Chief of Staff Todd.
I just want to confirm that we are all set with stormwater, because there were no questions asked this evening with regards to that program.
I didn't have any questions in the stormwater area.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'll give my fellow committee members an opportunity. Any questions? Councilor Flaherty. Okay. Questions? Councilor Maglia.
Nope.
Like water, they were the lucky ones tonight. All right. Terrific. Okay. Let me take a look here. So, okay. All right. So, seeing that we have nothing left on our agenda to discuss this evening, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. No? You are correct. We still have more departments to continue. Yes, we do. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Arnold. All right. So do we have a motion to table Order 22025?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, this
Good
evening.
evening, everybody.
Appreciate the